And so today, the Spectrum Pulse, pardon me, just finished dinner, is going to be on the Legionnaire because of the ship recent released. Um, and there's a lot of, I'd say, almost confusion surrounding the Legionnaire and surrounding boarding.
Which
Um,
Legionnaire?
yeah.
Oh, okay. And if anyone caught it, yes, I realized my mic was muted for the whole intro, and yes, I did forget to start the
Oh
recording.
no.
So, yeah.
Well, that's my bad. We're out of practice. I forgot to
No,
remind you to start the recording.
yeah. Well, I should have remembered. And you know what? It's a normal episode, so
hmm
it wouldn't be normal if I didn't forget to start the stupid recording.
That's going to be our catchphrase is a Pathfinder snafu. Situation normal, all effed up.
Yes, that is the
Um,
constant distress beacon we are sending out.
yeah. So the Spectrum Pulse, we like to come up with clever names for our segments, and this one's going to be called "Bored Out of Your Mind," talking about the Anvil Legionnaire and boarding operations. And Nazeris, you mentioned the numbers behind my name. The numbers are actually my former military occupational specialty. When I was in the Marines in the early mid 2000s, I was a 03 or 0311, 0311 rifleman, an infantryman, as well as a 0331 machine gunner. And I was also a foreign weapons instructor. And so I basically taught people how to shoot weapons that didn't belong to us. Um, and,
Just so
and so
if you
the
pick up
unit,
any weapon, like they'll know how to use it.
exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
In the real world, it isn't like in Halo where you just pick up an alien, a foreign weapon, and you just automatically know how to use it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Things are different.
Yeah, they're
Um,
not as intuitive as they are in video games.
yeah. The needler just doesn't. Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's totally how I use this.
Yeah. The one that I think actually would be a good comparison between real life and in a Halo game is the sword, because
Oh,
the sword is built for the elite hand, which is it splits because they I think do they have two
yeah,
dominant
they've got the
fingers?
weird
Yeah.
two or
So
three. I forget.
handling that as a human would be very, very different than a traditional sword, especially a something like a lightsaber or something where it's a stick
Hmm
or you have handle. So there actually need to be some form of training to get that grip on the sword to actually be able to use it.
I have to take a look at that sometime. But so when I was in the Marines, and this is why I'm such a nerd for the UE Marines, is because I still am a Marine at heart, even though I'm actually a soldier in the Army National Guard as well. Um, but one of the things I did, I was in a what's called a raider company. And so we specialized in small boat warfare special operations. And so if you have ever watched those like Navy SEAL commercials and you see the Navy SEALs riding around on those little rubber boats, looking all super cool and sneaky squirrel, that's what my unit did. Um, and so I actually got to partake in a lot of boarding training because sometimes we would be, using our boats to insert from our amphibious assault ships over the horizon at night onto a um, enemy held, in training coast. But we also used our boats for boarding operations. Um, and because we were trained in boarding operations on our boats, we also got trained in boarding operations via aircraft. Um, and so I got to train for these sorts of operations a lot and actually perform them live off the Horn of Africa on several pirate-held vessels back in 2006. So when I heard and saw that we were getting a dedicated boarding vessel for Star Citizen, I immediately got very excited because boarding operations are very complex, but it's something within Star Citizen that has a lot of lore supporting the use of boarding, um, as well as for me just a mechanic that it would to me is a lot cooler having a craft that's dedicated for it. And so I instantly became intrigued. And so the Legionnaire really, even though it's a dedicated, sorry,
Don't worry, I'll have plenty of questions after you get done with your stuff about different importing things. Now, I'm my brain's just going off on all these different questions I want to ask about the relationship between in-game and or real life and Legionnaire, and what stuff they should put in, or what stuff should have been put in. So
it'll be really interesting because it's just a concept right now, and we know concepts change.
Especially if there's really loud people in the community.
Yeah, and for a concept on a fighter probably isn't going to change too much, but a concept on something that is new and different and not well explored or fleshed out like this for Star Citizen and CIG could change quite a bit. So I made a bunch of notes regarding the Legionnaire after we got the actual concept information comm link, and as I also reviewed the we'll talk about the Q&A here before we use it as a segue into Naz's scanner anomaly. But I really like the Legionnaire because not only is it a dedicated boarding ship, but it also fills the role of a small dropship. You've got the it definitely fulfills that role as a small dropship compared to, say, the Valkyrie or something else. I'm sorry, beer went down the wrong tube.
Oh, jeez.
Pardon me. Because it is smaller, if you compare its size to the Valkyrie, it's a lot smaller, but it still has good sized VTOLs. I'm anticipating the Legionnaire to have a really good thrust to mass ratio, especially considering it doesn't have the large back end of the Valkyrie, the badonkadonk. Underneath that sort of tail, just like on the Pelican in Halo, there's nothing. It's just sort of empty.
Oh man!
And so
when I saw the shape of the Legionnaire, I'm like, oh my gosh, they did it! They made the ship that carries the tank on the back, and then when it came out to dropship, like, you ruined it. This shape had one purpose. It was to carry the tank. Because I'm like, it's a pelican. Yeah. It's the shape of a pelican. Because I saw some leaks before we actually knew what the ship was. I'm like, it's the perfect shape. And they just...
That's something I've been advocating for a while, is to have a Valkyrie variant, kind of like the Pelican, remove that vehicle bay and maybe even the troop compartment in order to have some sort of attachment for like a heavy vehicle, like the
Legionnaire would be perfect for that.
Yeah, if it was bigger, obviously.
Is it not big enough for a tank?
No, it's itty bitty. But the that itty bittiness, the smallness of the Legionnaires is one of its strengths, because it has those 4 VTOLs. It should have really good maneuverability, and responsiveness and speed within atmosphere, within gravity, as a dropship should, far more so than the Valkyrie because of its size. And so,
if it dropped the personnel transport, it should be able to fit.
Yeah, but it's the thrust to mass ratio should be really good, and that's why I'm really interested in it, because it makes it more like a smaller helicopter. I was doing yard work all day, and
oh jeez,
I must have some dust or something.
We have a size comparison up on the screen now. So.
It's like comparing a smaller helicopter to a much larger one in terms of maneuverability and ability to change position. And so that makes the Legionnaire potentially a really optimal vehicle for insertion and extraction of small squads into onto any planet, but especially into areas that are sort of confined spaces. You've got narrow canyons, large caves. When we get planets in the future with thick jungle canopies and um,
I definitely
small
hope,
landing zones and stuff.
I definitely hope destruction on trees will be a thing that they actually look into. So when something crashes
Oh
in the
yeah.
forest, we get that shearing of the trees.
Hmm. And I know they mentioned destructible flora, fauna, and stuff, and hopefully that extends all the way up to the large trees, not just the bushes and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not just,
but
oh, it's broken. Piff, gone.
hmm and that small size really should make it a valuable insertion craft for challenging atmospheric conditions. It's a bit more aerodynamic, but also, maybe high gravity, all sorts of different things. Um, and I think that makes it really versatile. Yeah, it only carries a squad of 8, but for a lot of the content in the game that we're going to have, a squad of 8 is going to be just fine. That's a good amount of people, and
Yeah.
it lacks, as long as depending on need, maybe if you need the what sort of resistance you're expecting. Bringing escorts is never a bad idea. It could be very helpful because the
I think it was
Legionnaire doesn't
also,
have.
I think it was also Newify that was talking about when the steel came out. Like, that is too many people in one ship for the steel. So having multiple Legionnaires is a better option than having a Legionnaire with twice the amount of people. Because you can protect the people inside a lot better if it's 2 different ships instead of 16 people in one ship.
That is basically the premise for large scale landing operations. You are expecting to take casualties. You are expecting to lose craft. You want to spread your landing force around. That's why the Valkyrie was developed. It's literally part of the lore. It for the same reasons we do that now, where you spread an entire battalion of Marines across an entire company of landing vehicles. Because if you lose one or two, the mission goes on. Versus putting everybody in one basket.
Yeah.
That basket loses a couple of thrusters and goes splat, then the mission's over.
I hope they do have at least one scene in Squadron where you see, probably not Legionnaire, that ship is probably sailed. They probably have all the ships they need for a Squadron now. But I want to see, maybe some player can recreate it when we get the Legionnaire in game and server meshing, which is a large scale landing force landing and setting up a front, spreading across the C2, the Valkyrie, and the Legionnaire, and all of these landing and trying to what's the word for getting the people out of the ship?
Disembark,
and all of its troops and vehicles disembarked. Like, that would be an incredible scene to watch.
I'm totally anticipating that for the wouldn't be the sequel, but the single player campaign first person shooter oriented one for the 6th Platoon Phantoms of the UE Marines.
Yeah,
they're the Marine equivalent of Squadron 42.
And just so because we deal in factual stuff here, nothing's been announced about another game.
Yeah.
We're just saying we'd like it to be the story of the 6th Platoon, and I'm on board with this. After the 6th Platoon, the only place to go after that for a third story mode, would be the Outlaws saga. Like,
there's a lot of different routes that could take too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
the smuggler, the bounty hunter,
And like I'd want them, because Star Citizen is the sandbox. So I'd want them to do, you are this person. A very, like, you are this person storytelling. So you have to do you're this, you have these set of skills, go do these things. Because Star Citizen is kind of, well, and its story modes are very open-ended, it's more likely to be you are a outlaw and you deal in bounty hunting or illegal trade somewhere in that kind of vague area of just lawlessness. So it can give you, like, hey, your mission is to go get that thing. Go do however you want. So it's kind of like distilling the outlaw gameplay of Star Citizen into a cinematic kind of experience,
Hmm.
which would be insanely difficult.
But yeah, that's the versatility of the Legionnaire because of its size, and what I'm assuming should be good maneuverability, due to that thrust to mass ratio, is really a strength, compared to the larger dropships, especially given the frequency with which you'll need to insert a team of that size. So it's a really, I think, a well-designed craft for the small dropship role, on top of being a dedicated boarding ship, and having being able to do both. Because it's got the ramp that just drops out of the back end, just like the other dropships. It can rapidly deploy that squad. Having the ability for the ship to do both, perform both roles is really valuable, and especially at I call it the starter dropship because of the pricing. War Bond $100 with LTI credit at $120. That's an absolute steal when we're so used to steel, STEAL, not steel like the Drake Cutlass steel. But when we're used to the whole dropship tax thing, which I think is for good reason, because I think that CIG puts emphasis on dropships because they know how valuable they're going to be to their gameplay, and players don't really appreciate it just yet. I think it's a giant signal, but that's a lot of value considering the capabilities that it brings to the table. Being heavily armored but small and maneuverable, able to insert a small team either onto the ground or onto an enemy ship. Um, it's yeah, that's a pretty dang good value.
Yeah,
Um,
we really won't know what moving stuff means until we get permadeath.
yep.
And when we need to either get people to the ground or stuff to the next hab, and we can't just backspace, we can't just do a whole bunch of stuff that we do now, and inventories become so much more persistent, it will take on new meaning. And CIG knows it. CIG has been planning all of their ships.
Yeah.
From at least 2015, 2017 onward, for the end game, not the game we have now. And the Legionnaire and the Liberator are both excessive examples of those two principles. Like, they know what we're going to need when the game is done, not what we need
And they're
now.
dropping giant hints in our laps as to what that will be. And
Seriously.
people are, oh, I don't see why I would ever use this. Oh, come on. Come on.
Because the game's it's not a solo game, and you will need buddies, and you will need, probably, if you're doing anything worthwhile, like doing anything worth doing in Star Citizen, is going to take friends. And that is going to become, hopefully, very excessively apparent when server mission comes in. So a bunker mission may just need a Legionnaire of people, because you won't just have the 8 guys in the bunker, or the 8 guys at a time on the wave bunkers. You'll have the entrenched people in the front door on top of the ground. You'll have the barricade people inside, and then you'll have the reinforcements when you come out of the bunker. It's not just going to be a run in and all the ads all bugged out already, so you just run in, shoot them, and leave. It's going to get difficult, and they are planning for a lot more NPCs to be around everywhere.
And the other thing is the reason that dropships like the Valkyrie and the Legionnaire and even the Cutlass have VTOLs is because VTOLs are going to matter. The maneuverability and ability to maneuverability at slow speeds, and the ability to hover, the ability to go into VTOL mode and brake when you're coming screaming in from on high, in order to break your speed before you don't want to splat on the ground, it's to slow down and then flare like that and come to a land and rapidly deploy troops. You're not going to be able to do that with other ships. That's the whole point. And maybe you haven't read it, but CIG has made it clear multiple times about how VTOLs will work and what the advantages of VTOLs will be. And so it's going to be a thing. You're not just going to come in with your ship that isn't equipped appropriately and expect to be successful. There's advantages to these things. Moving on more with the size, the Legionnaire is a extra small ship. It fits within the extra small hangar. They confirmed it in the Q&A. And so that is a huge bit of news, because that means it was designed specifically to fit within ships with an extra small or larger hangar. So it's going to fit in an Odyssey. It's going to fit in a BMM, a Abandoned Merchantman. And most importantly to me, it's going to fit in the hangar of a Polaris. And I don't think that this is a coincidence at all, that it was made to fit in a Polaris, because it really enhances the functionality that the Polaris has with it. I also don't think it's a coincidence, because the Polaris itself is actually named after Commander Hester Polaris, who is a Tavaran war hero. She with her bridge crew fought off Tavaran borders. I don't know how to say it. It's Nale or something like that. Naulle. She fought off Tavaran borders on her ship while still commanding the bridge after they were ambushed during the First Tavaran War. So she's got borders on her ship. She's fighting them off. And she's doing this while simultaneously, and she's commanding a small corvette. And so she's fighting off borders with her bridge crew, while the bridge crew she's commanding the bridge crew to engage and attack the strike fleet that ambushed her. And she was able to destroy 3 capital ships while she's got people, in the corridor outside her bridge taking pot shots at her and everything, which is just absolutely nuts. And she repeatedly, harassed the strike fleet in order to keep them on their toes and keep them away from the civilian population, and keep them from attacking civilian targets. So she's credited with saving countless lives, along with the destruction of those 3 capital ships and delaying the strike fleet until the UE Navy could come and reinforce her. She ultimately died from her wounds, but went down as a hero, and that's why the Polaris is named after her. So the Polaris, designed the way it is, has a dedicated boarding craft, built to operate from that ship. I think it's a non-coincidental stroke of irony that now the Polaris, named after her Hester Polaris, has a very capable craft for conducting boarding operations against enemy targets,
human enemy targets.
Yeah, well, any. But I mean, obviously not Tavaran anymore, probably, but but there's numerous examples, and that's just one example of how boarding in the lore works, and how it can be disruptive. And the boarding operation by the Tavaran didn't work out in their favor. They didn't anticipate Hester Polaris operating her ship so effectively. But there's a lot of other examples where they talk about boarding in the lore. One of the best ones is in Instrument of Surrender, where the Tavaran, it talks about the Tavaran using the prowlers to stealthily deploy these Naule, maybe that's how you say it. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Who are they're highly trained infiltrators and saboteurs, and they basically stealthily land on the hull of a capital ship and force their way in. And then even the Vandal have a dedicated boarding craft they called cleavers, and they're basically these things that get shot at UE capital ships, and they've got like all these spikes, and they it's almost like a boarding torpedo, and they latch onto the side of the ship bore a hole or cut a hole through the side, and establish essentially a makeshift airlock in which to insert Vandal onto UE ships.
I'm gonna call those the can openers.
Yeah, basically that's what it is. They're
Like,
really mean looking.
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen the white box concept art for them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're scary looking.
Yeah, they
And
were
in some of
probably the scariest Vandal ship.
yeah, well, and you can see, I forget in which Squadron 42 related video, they actually show one of them like protruding through the hole where Vandal had boarded the ship.
Oh yeah, that's it was a ruined it was a ruined Idris shot, yeah.
Yeah.
Which means
Spoiler alert.
yeah,
We're
that
gonna
I was
get
gonna say
Squadron
I was gonna
42.
say what I think that actually means, but I feel like I'm more well equipped to know, so I'm gonna refrain from saying what I mean in case it is spoilers. So carry on.
The the CIG has embraced the tactical and strategic value of boarding operations and dedicated boarding craft. And with the Legionnaire being able to board ships, it really enhances the functionality of the Polaris, which is a multi-mission capable corvette. That's the way it's billed as. It's not just an attack craft. It's meant to do a lot of things to serve not only the Navy, but militias. That's what it was designed for. And so the Polaris is equipped with an armory, a brig, and a medical bay. So obviously, the armory, along with a dedicated boarding craft, supports mercenary contracts, where you're boarding an enemy target or landing on a surface, to do something like a bunker mission or whatever. But the Polaris is fully capable of outfitting a team of mercenaries to go and do whatever sort of contract you'd have that team go do. And now the Polaris can carry a craft that's capable of carrying them to wherever their mission is going to take them. The brig on the Polaris supports the bounty hunter, the bounty hunting function. Those mercenaries, can maybe the mission is going to go and capture a high value bounty target. Whether it's on, the bounty is on a ship, and you need to take them alive because you want that bonus payment, or maybe they're down on the planet, holed up in their command center or whatever, like what's going on behind me in the bunkers on Hurston and stuff. Okay, once you have taken down the enemy and secured the bounty, you have to have a place to put them. You can throw them onto the deck of the Legionnaire, take them back up to the Polaris, and lock them up in the brig. But then the Polaris also has the medical bay, as well as a pretty decent sized cargo bay, and we assume plenty of storage for tools and supplies and everything like that. So the Legionnaire also supports the functionality for doing medical and rescue missions. You can imagine you get an alert saying that the ship's been disabled or damaged. They've got wounded on board, or some sort of disaster, or maybe people were attacked down on a planet. You can go down there with your medics and your engineers, either onto another ship or down to the surface, and provide medical aid, transport people back up to the Polaris for further medical treatment. You can bring over supplies and components along with engineers over to another ship to get them back underway and get them repaired. All those sorts of things, and so the functionality of the and then as well a security team along with the engineers and the medics or something like that. The functionality of the Polaris is really enhanced by the ability to carry a Legionnaire. It's a lot more valuable to me based off of how I want to play with my Polaris, and how I'm sure there's a lot of other people like me want to play with their Polaris, than simply just throwing a fighter in there. Ooh, more guns, or I can take on different types of missions.
Before you said that, I didn't actually think of it. The medical stuff. I just looked it up. A Apollo will fit in the hangar.
I'd have to look at the metrics again. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Legionnaire is 32 and the Apollo is 43. And the thing you have in the show notes, the extra small being 72, 128, 36. I know it's units, not meters. Yeah.
What are you
Oh, no,
talking
that's
about?
large. Never mind. I was reading it backwards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the extra small is at the bottom.
24, 32, 12.
24, 32, 12. Yeah, I don't think the
It's
Apollo's gonna fit.
43. No. Okay. It's. Ooh. It will fit. It will fit. Only because I bet the room's bigger than that.
Well, so that's the
Diagonal.
yeah. It'll fit jank,
Yeah.
and I don't subscribe to jank.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
But so to me, the Legionnaire is to the Valkyrie as a Blackhawk is to the Sea Stallion. If you're not familiar with the Blackhawk and the Sea Stallion, go ahead and look them up. You know, they're super common helicopters in the U.S. military. But it's basically things that I operated from. A Blackhawk, you know, is pretty well known. The UH-60 Blackhawk, the Navy uses them, the Army uses them, the Air Force uses them. Marine Corps doesn't have them, but we would operate from Navy Blackhawks on their ships. But a Blackhawk is a lot smaller than the Sea Stallion. The Sea Stallion is the largest helicopter in the U.S. military inventory. It is huge and very powerful, and that's why it's more like the Valkyrie as far as size and capability. Because a Blackhawk is the Legionnaire is 32 meters long, 23.3 meters wide, and 10.2 meters tall, whereas the Valkyrie is 48 meters long, so 16 meters longer, 38 meters wide, so 14 meters wider, and then 12 meters high, so it's just a hair taller. And let's see, Moriar the Chosen in chat said, okay, so here's the issue. Thinking the ship will survive is an issue. People thinking their ship will survive and not be destroyed is far-fetched. People will destroy that ship. And I'm going to get to that because we're going to talk about some of the challenges associated with boarding. Because, yeah, if you're
And
just
why
going to
you
try
never
and approach
fly
it,
alone.
yeah, if you just approach an enemy target, with a Legionnaire, on its own, you're probably going to have a bad time, depending on the target, obviously.
Okay, have you ever swatted a mosquito?
Yeah. But the Blackhawk compared to a Sea Stallion, Blackhawk 65 feet long, 54 feet wide, 17 feet high. And those are measurements including the rotor disc. And has 4 crew seats, so dual pilots and then 2 crew chiefs, or a crew chief. And for me, I'm an actual flight paramedic on a Blackhawk, and up to 11 fully equipped troops, 11 troop seats. The Sea Stallion is 99 feet long, 79 feet wide, and 18 feet tall, or 28 feet tall. Again, including the rotors, and again has 4 crew seats, dual pilot with 2 crew chiefs. I accidentally deleted it. But it's in its normal capacity, normal configuration, can carry 38 fully equipped troops.
Wow.
And 38. That's a whole Marine platoon, or up to I think it's 53 if you put in the center aisle seats. It just means your troops are equipped. They're not carrying their great big huge pack with them. So the troop capacity is far and away is a lot larger than a Blackhawk. But you can also can take out seats, can put small vehicles in there. I've actually deployed a Zodiac from a little Zodiac rowboat from the inside of a Blackhawk or a Sea Stallion, and then deployed it back into. Jaden Cottrell, thanks buddy for joining us. Welcome to the stream. 07, my friend. And so Nazeris, if you can bring up that picture of the Blackhawk that I have in our show notes.
Yes.
We'll wrap this up with challenges regarding boarding operations, and then we'll look at a few things on the Legionnaire Q&A. And so this image is a pretty good example of what boarding looks like nowadays. And like I said, I've boarded pirate-held vessels twice via Zodiac small boat, where we had to pull up alongside a cargo ship and literally throw boarding ladders up over the rail in order to. It wasn't a large cargo ship, but large to us, but wasn't huge. The climb up the side wasn't that bad in order to board the ship. But then I've also boarded a much larger cargo ship like this via Blackhawk, where we hovered over the top deck. We had, let's see, 2 or 3. It was a long time ago. We had like 3 Blackhawks.
Oh, wow.
Worth of infantry that deployed on this ship to secure the ship because it was so big. But basically, 2 of them are loitering, flying around. We've got guns at the ready in order to, put suppressing fire down, while one of them deploys and then the next one moves in, and you're quickly fast roping down onto the deck and then moving to secure the ship. But this is just an example of a training operation. You can see down in the bottom right-hand corner, that's actually a breaching prop, where you've got them, using their breaching tools or charges or whatever in order to practice breaching a simulated door. But this is actually a flat deck landing craft that they are practicing boarding. And you can see what looks like another Blackhawk out in the distance behind, providing overwatch. They're not in the right position for it, or maybe they're getting ready to be the ones to drop off troops. And so just a few things to talk about as far as challenges with boarding that are things that we trained for and prepared for that I think still apply, just in a different way. The first thing, obviously, is return fire. So craft used in boarding operations are vulnerable, even in the case of the Legionnaire. The Legionnaire has heavy armor. It's got 3 small shields, so should have decent regen, but that's not a big shield pool. But at least it has heavy armor. But it's still heavy armor on a small ship. And so if your target still has teeth and you're getting within range in order to try and attempt boarding that ship, you're going to have a bad time. If you're trying to board let's say a caterpillar, you might be okay. The caterpillar doesn't have a whole lot of guns, doesn't have a whole lot of defenses. Maybe it's all by itself. But if you're trying to board an Idris, or maybe another Polaris or something like that, or a Kraken, you need to make sure that your target has had its teeth removed, as well as you want to make sure that you have covering fire or overwatch, and in this instance that means ships. And so that way, maybe you have, you think you've disabled your target, knocked out a power plant or something like that, or some power junctions, and the guns go silent, and okay, now we can move into board. But you still want to make sure you're providing cover, so that way if on approach, maybe an engineer on the enemy ship reroutes power, if they start shooting again, you want to be able to quickly shoot back, disable those weapons, do what you need to do in order to protect that boarding craft with all those boarders on board. So it's something you really need to consider. And that's why we would have additional, you don't go in it alone. There's other craft with other members of the team. They're providing overwatch. Maybe you have snipers on a nearby vessel, that sort of thing. We always had some sort of overwatch in order to have eyes on the target, in order to alert the boarding team to danger, but also to respond to danger. Because once you're committed to that boarding operation, you're vulnerable. The next thing is is the target a moving target? It's really hard to, with a Legionnaire, it's going to be pretty hard to dock with a moving target. They can roll, they can accelerate, slow down, all that sort of stuff. Same thing, it's kind of like when we were trying to, if a ship was still moving while we were trying to board it, the pilot has to maintain a hover over a moving vessel, which is hard, or the coxswains, the people who drive our little boats, have to try and maintain speed next to a ship, with all that other stuff going on while we're trying to board. It's a huge pain in the butt. So and it makes the operation that much more dangerous. So with the Legionnaire, one of the things you want to be consider is your target disabled, or is it at least partially disabled? Is it less maneuverable? Is it not able to fly as quickly? Anything to make it so that way the pilot of the Legionnaire can have an easier and safer time docking, rather than getting rammed or something like that, or the boarding operation taking longer than it needs to. The next major challenge is once you've docked, or once you are that you're no longer on approach, you've gotten, in this case, over the ship. You have to worry about the fatal funnel, and the fatal funnel isn't just the docking proboscis arm of the Legionnaire, but it's the that last minute approach. And so while you're conducting boarding, the boarders are very vulnerable until they can move, disperse within the target, or get to some sort of cover. And so you want to make sure that you're able to provide covering fire. If you're moving down that boarding tunnel, or boarding, what are we calling that thing? The boarding arm, docking arm.
I like tunnel.
Okay.
Maybe it's a what do they call the ones on the stations? Isn't it just a tunnel? Spline.
Yeah.
Umbilical cord. I can't speak today. It's fine.
So Moriar, the chosen, says in chat, I'm speaking from the attacker's perspective. I'd rather destroy the target than try to board. It's easier to clean up than deal with the crew inside. What if your objective isn't to destroy the target? What if the objective of the contract, of the mission, is to capture the ship? What if you want to capture the ship because you want to take it over and use it for your own purposes?
Or the only thing better than one ship is two ships.
Yeah. Intact salvage is far more valuable than a bunch of pieces. What if your target is on board and you need to take them alive? There's all these different things that will come into play where destroying the ship isn't an option, or the boarding the ship is a much better option or a more profitable option, that sort of thing.
And what weapons do you have, and how big is your target?
Yeah, do you have the weapons to destroy the target? If you only have small weapons, you may be able to, maybe you're kitted out to disable a target, but you're not kitted out to destroy it. And time to destroy is going to get real long, real fast for larger ships.
And then fuel costs are going to be a thing, and situation decisions will be everly increasing in complexity and how much you actually have to know about the situation you're in to make educated decisions.
These mercenary missions that I talked about could entirely be, hey, a company or an organization or something like that has really valuable cargo or a very valuable contract associated with something on board their cargo ship, and that ship was captured, and they want you to recapture it. They want that ship intact. They want the cargo intact. You can't just blow it up. That's where the state of Star Citizen right now has really gotten us into a false sense of what the game is and what it will be. And it's a lot more granular than that. It's no different than why was I or they've got captives, the 890 jump mission.
What if that was your ship?
Rescue. Your people are on board, or people you need to rescue are on board. You don't want to blow up the ship. That was for us. Boarding the pirate held vessels. We want to return those ships to their owners, but we also want to liberate the crew who are being held hostage.
I think the
Um,
890 mission is a really good example. Like, it is
yeah.
a hostage situation, as far as you know. No, because there is white security on there. Yeah,
Hmm.
it is a hostage situation.
Yep. Yeah.
So you don't want to blow
Those
it up.
things are. It's those are going to be all, the designers, the mission designers are just going to have an absolute field day creating scenarios where boarding is going to be, you know either absolutely necessary or a good option, depending on what you're doing or what your own priorities are. Player agency is a thing.
I can't wait till after this ship comes out now, and
Hmm.
Invictus,
Yeah.
Idris,
And the fatal
Javelin,
funnel that
Bangle.
actually leads to the, part of the Q&A, they did say that the boarding or docking collar, whatever you want to call it, or boarding tunnel, whatever, is going to have deployable cover. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's going to make fighting your way onto the enemy ship, a little bit more tenable rather than just running down a hallway waiting to get shot.
Nice.
And the last thing, and this is just not an all inclusive list. This is just things that I remembered right off the top of my head, from my days doing this and training to do it. Um, I'm sure that there are more up to date things and more up to date doctrine. There's things that I'm missing, but this is just examples that I remembered, from the good old days. But the last thing is the security cordon. Is the area around the boarding operation secure? Maybe you've disabled the target craft. Um, you've knocked it, so it can't get away. You've knocked out its teeth, um, so it can't shoot down your borders and stuff. Um, but the target vessel could have radioed for, send out a request for help. They could have reinforcements coming. So do you have a security cordon around your target and your boarding operation, so that way reinforcements can't come in and disrupt it? Because, like I said, you are very vulnerable during a boarding operation, and if somebody comes in and starts shooting, things can go real far south really quick. Let's see. Jaden says, "Don't forget the SRV just entered production and will likely be in game before the Legionnaire. You can just disable the engines, and the SRV is able to tow a ship in QT to a station to repair the captured ship."
Disabled engines is
And
not disabled guns.
yeah, and that is true. Yeah, if you're able to disable the ship, it just depends. Like I said, it depends on the mission. It
Yeah.
depends on the contract.
Like
Um,
deciding to board a ship is a very specific action.
yeah.
It is not it's it's very hard to say you will always or never need to board.
Hmm.
Just like you can't say you will always or never need to destroy or always will never disable your targets. It's a very each situation you go into will have different factors. So let's say a caterpillar full of cargo. Even if lawful or unlawful, you have different things that would change what you want to do with the mission. Maybe it's simply you're a pirate, they're going to pay you to kill NPCs on it, and you don't care about the cargo. You don't want to spend time getting it into your cargo hold, and you don't want to spend time flying a dusty old caterpillar back to a port. So you just blow it up. But if you wanted to get paid more than just the mission, you could go in and take it over. Hostage? No, not was it. Was the term takeover? Aggressive takeover. Forgot the word. Or you could disable it, tow it, like was mentioned, or you could just let it adrift and call authorities. So there's lots of moving parts that's going to come into a lot of different scenarios. And that's just a caterpillar full of cargo. That is one objective.
Yeah. And you could, if you're in Stanton, you could use an SRV to tow it back.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in Pyro, is there a friendly station you can tow it back to?
Do you have enough fuel
You
to get
know,
there?
do you have enough fuel to get there? Is your mercenary mission to recover this ship and bring it back to wherever, or to, bring in this bounty alive? All these different things. It's very granular. CIG wouldn't make this ship if they didn't have plans in order to necessitate, or at least, make the boarding option valuable, to players. It's either going to be you need to board, and if you're not well, if you're well equipped to do it, great. Maybe you're well equipped to do that board, mission because that's what you want to do. Or maybe you avoid those missions because you're not well equipped for it. It's just depends on how you want to play the game and the missions and contracts that you want to take out. But if you have to go into Pyro in order to take this bounty alive or rescue these hostages, all these different things, you're going to have to board the ship. You're going to have to disable the ship, and you're going to have to board the ship. And having a dedicated boarding ship, can make that a better option, especially considering, otherwise you're going to have to do a DVA. And that presents with it a whole bunch of challenges, as far as trying to breach a ship and then board it if you're floating around in space with limited EVA fuel and all that sort of stuff. You can see how these things are, there's a reason our little background thing has the lines for the pathfinding through the verse. You connect the dots. CIG is dropping hint bombs for us, everybody. This is where it's going. And so to wrap up with the Legionnaire, they just posted the Q&A, which was really good, pretty informative. They actually picked some pretty decent questions. They let us know that the conditions for docking are the same as if with Constellation and Merlin. So as long as things are aligned, you can dock. It can be done at any speed, but obviously it's going to be easier if it's done more slowly. So it's advantageous to you to disable or at least partially disable the target ship to make it easier for the Legionnaire pilot to dock with it. Right now, they're saying that the Legionnaire can quantum with the target if the target ship quantums away. So that's really going to be really interesting to see how that works out.
Might be another ship, maybe a Mantis.
Yeah, exactly. That's using a Mantis or any ship with a QED is going to be a good idea. Make sure they can't get away, and then you disable them. Blah blah blah. The planned range for the hacking abilities is only going to be a few kilometers. So that's why it's going to be so important to really take out the teeth of that target, or at least some of them, so that way you can start hacking them, because you're going to be in range of the enemy's guns. We won't get too much into hacking, but players will be able to counter the Legionnaire's hacking ability. The thing that really was confusing to me and didn't make sense, and Nazeris is going to get into this a whole lot more, but one person asked, what can be hacked on the target vessel? For example, will we be able to disable or activate self-destruct, open and close airlocks, manipulate thrusters? And they said the Legionnaire systems are dedicated to the specific and directed task of overriding and overcoming the docking air traffic control systems of the target ship, which in-universe is a sufficient challenge by itself. They are not able to address the other command systems of the target ship. To me, I think it would be a whole lot better if you could hack, and just like with any of the other hacking, be able to, if you get the hacking done right, you can, disable, thruster, these thrusters, or disable this power plant, or better yet, once you're able to get docked, be able to hack into the security system and open and close doors, vent atmosphere, in order to give your boarders a tactical advantage. It should be one of those things where those hacks are really difficult, but the risk reward benefit, along with players being able to counter them, I think would make for a lot more interesting gameplay, and it would really incentivize players a whole lot more to have somebody who is skilled in engineering in order to counter, to do that sort of counter hack or counter the hack, operate the AI antivirus stuff, or operate the computer's antivirus stuff. They confirmed that it'll fit in capital ships like the Polaris and the Idris. It's an extra small. It cannot be used at this time. So can the Legionnaire also be used against ships that do not have an airlock, such as the Crusader Hercules? Are turret hardpoints alternative dockable breakthrough points? And they said at this point in time, we are only committing to it being able to breach dedicated airlock entry points, both the small and large varieties. While we would like manned turrets to be valid breach points in the future via EVA, it is not currently planned to allow automated docking systems to dock with them. Makes me wonder if at some point in the future, with physicalized damage and all that, if there's a hole in the side of the ship, could potentially the Legionnaire dock with a hole? You know, create an airlock or something around the hole and board there. They confirmed that there are deployable covers built into the tunnel to help the boarding team make it to the target. There are no crew facilities, so this is not a long-range, long-duration ship. It's why it's an extra small and meant to be operated from a hangar of a larger ship. So, yeah, not equipped for extended durations, extended stay, that sort of thing. Complete the mission, return to base. They said that there's going to be space on board to carry heavy special weapons and heavy armor in the equipment room. Let's see. And they said, we are working with the core gameplay pillar to ensure that if heavy armor cannot be worn in the seats, as not all seats will have this restriction, then it is in the least impactful place to allow quick equipping before boarding. So if you're in the drop seats and you can't wear heavy armor, you'll be able to equip it before boarding. You know, get out of your drop seat, get in your heavy armor from the locker. So maybe you take one or two people in heavy armor.
Yeah, which is team. Also a good example of how this is gameplay not for current design, but for the end design.
Yeah, their end point. Does the Legion have any measures to disguise itself from early detection? So no stealth. No. The Legionnaire is Anvil, so it has armor. It is meant to be. It is heavily armored. It has decent shields for a small ship. I really hope it got a size 2. I hope it gets an upgrade to 1 size 2. I think it'd be better than 3 size 1s, but that's just my opinion. The Legionnaire has built-in hacking, whereas other ships are going to need. In order to have that hacking, you're going to have to install the blade in order to do that. So that's an advantage that the Legionnaire has over other ships for doing hacking stuff. But they further iterate. For example, you could upgrade the Vanguard Sentinel to support ATC hacking, but you need to manually EVA over to board after that. So they're still saying that the hacking will only be for allowing boarding, docking, airlock access, that sort of thing. But it does, the way they wrote that one makes it sound like it's not just the docking, but also being able to, I don't know, it's weird. Because like why would you, upgrade that? But player choice, whatever.
Yeah.
How maneuverable would the Legionnaire be compared to the Cutlass Steel, Prowler, Vanguard Hoplite, and Valkyrie? Its maneuverability will be closest to the Steel, but as the ship progresses during development, we'll adjust it as necessary to reflect its much heavier armor.
So less.
So it does have
Steel.
heavy armor. Yeah. And that was a debate in Inforunners for a while about the armor on the Steel, because in the Steel comlink, they did say that it had mil-spec armor. So it does have armor. I'm assuming it means more than a Cuddy Black, but we'll just have to wait and see. But hopefully the maneuverability is pretty good. Obviously the Cutlass Steel is a lot more maneuverable than the Valkyrie. But mass-wise, the Vanguard Hoplite and the Prowler should be very maneuverable, but the Vanguard Hoplite doesn't have VTOL. So you're not going to be hovering for very long in a Hoplite. It's meant for forward flight. How heavy is the armor compared to other ships, considering it might take hits from much larger vessels as a boarding ship? It is designed to take significant fire on approach, so it's relatively heavily armored compared to other dropships and much closer to other Anvil ships, such as the Terrapin. The co-pilot controls one turret as well as a hacking system. The pilot has the other turret slaved to his view, the one on the front. and both can manage the shields. NPC co-pilots will be able to do the role of hacking if no human is present, but there's no plans for any bounty seats or cells for holding captured enemies. So, put some zip tie cuffs around their wrists and throw them on the floor, and that's it for the steel.
Legionnaire.
The Legionnaire.